Priceless.
Welcome to another episode of the Limitless Life Podcast. I am your host, Kyle Smith. And if you have not done so, hit that subscribe button so that you never miss another podcast. And if you love this podcast and you want some more tips and tricks on how to improve yourself, go ahead and subscribe to my YouTube channel. There are a ton of instructional videos there. You can find the links below. However, for today, on this beautiful, beautiful Friday evening, today my guest is Mukai Maromo. I believe I got that right. Yeah. Mentor, coach, trainer, NCAA track and field athlete, professional Muay Thai and MMA fighter, and a relentless entrepreneur. Mukai, my man. Welcome.
That was a great intro, dude. I should have you introduce me everywhere I go.
Yeah. Just like I'll just channel my inner Bruce Buffer and I'll be like,
yeah, dude.
Yeah, just every single time.
I'll just record it, and then before I say anything, like if I'm meeting people, I'll like listen to this first.
Yeah, exactly. So, yeah, tell us a little bit about you. Tell us a little story about you.
Oh, dude, I've got too many stories. I'll just summarize me in a nutshell. Mukai, obviously, I was born and raised in Zimbabwe. I grew up there, lived there for a minute. My parents migrated to Zimbabwe when I was 13, 14. Then I went to boarding school, really learned a lot from that. So I lived in Botswana and Zimbabwe at that time. Then moved to the States, attended university in the States. After that, Canada, you know what I mean? Then discovered martial arts in Canada, became a professional Muay Thai fighter. Discovered MMA when I moved to Edmonton, became a professional MMA fighter, dabbled in both sports for a while, retired, and then I became an entrepreneur, and the rest is history.
That's beautiful. So I love that. I love that little summary. So what part of you and your childhood, or actually, what do I need to know about your youth in order to understand the person in front of me?
I think all of it was very influential because I grew up in a third world country. So I'll summarize it like this. The most important part is I grew up in a third world country. So the way I look at things and process them is very different. You know what I mean? A lot of the things is the same because I've lived here in Canada or North America long enough that it's like I moved when I was 2018 actually. So when I was 18. So I've lived in North America for more than half my life. So it's like I'm this kind of amalgamation of Africa because I grew up in Zimbabwe till I was 18. So I had enough of a foundation to be African. But then I left when I was a young adult and then lived in North America. So I've got enough exposure to that culture to be North American. So it's like this weird combination of the two. And then in one of the more influential parts was boarding school. So when I was 14, like I said, 13, 14, my parents moved from Harare, not from Gweru in Zimbabwe, like which is a city, to Botswana because my dad was a mechanical engineer. So we moved to Botswana for like his job, obviously. So the education system in the country wasn't the same as the one in Zimbabwe. So in order for continuity, like with regards to education and everything, we went to a boarding school. That was different, you know, because like for most people, you never leave home until you're actually an adult, you know, versus now you're like 13, 14 and you leave home and you live in like a dormitory military style with like, you know what I mean, 14 other guys, you know, and you're being watched by a prefect who's like an older guy who's like 17, 18. So you have students being watched by older students. So it's like really interesting dynamic that kind of forms when you're not in that kind of, you know, environment, you know, and so I was exposed to that for a huge part of my childhood. And then, you know, migrated into a different culture. So I moved to a different country completely where, you know, you can't prepare for that because there's culture shock. You know, people don't understand what culture shock is because, you know, you have to go to a different culture to get it. You know, it's like the things that are different are the things you would never assume are different anywhere. You know, slang, things that you laugh at, the way jokes are put together and delivered, you know? So it's like when you translate certain jokes to English, it just makes no sense. You know what I mean? So it's like you find yourself thinking in a different language and then you say something and people look at you like, what the fuck? And then you're like, okay, you know? Or being afraid to talk because you've got an accent, but where you're from, you don't have an accent. So now when you talk, no one really listens to what you say because the way you said it is like, holy shit, dude, where are you from? And now it's like, oh man, I can't even communicate because as soon as I say something, where are you from? What are you doing here? You know, all these things. It's like, it's the same conversation with everybody, you know what I mean? And it's kind of weird because for people asking you these things, it's a whole new conversation for them. But for you, it's like, holy shit, man. Like, I have this conversation with anybody who hears my accent. Because, like, you find yourself being afraid to talk, for example. You know what I mean? So it's very interesting. So those are probably the things that were most impactful in my life. And then becoming a professional fighter, having a non-traditional career path, that sort of thing.
Nice. So you were in a third world country, now in a first world country. What are the biggest contrasts? What do you recognize? What kind of sticks out to you that you've maybe pondered or reflected on recently?
Oh,
What
dude,
the
it's
difference
not
is?
even recently. It's like all the time.
Yeah.
I'll give you a weird story. I'd say cool, but it's different. So I was at a wedding last summer. Okay, I'm hanging out at a wedding, and people, as you do at weddings, when you're sitting at a table, you introduce yourself. Hey, I'm so and so. I'm from such and such a place, a little bit. And so I say, oh, Mukai, you know, I was born and raised in Zimbabwe. So this one young lady was sitting across from me. She goes, oh, I have a question for you. And she jumped in to start talking about why they don't have you know, medical, like, you know, universal medical aid, all these, a whole lot of shit, you know? And I just say a whole lot of shit because it was a question asked from like a very North American perspective. You know what I mean? So I was like, oh, hey, listen, I get it. It's easy to think about any country and saying they don't have these things, but you have to remember, like, this is a very small, single, solitary country. You know what I mean? When you look at Canada, it's like a continent. You know what I mean? Alberta is as big as some countries. You know what I mean? And so it's a continent that's kind of masquerading as a country. So when you talk about resources, especially human resources and actual resources like access to capital, et cetera, Canada and the USA are very resource rich because they're continents, you know, but like the States, for example, has got 50 countries in one, you know? So when you kind of put like a 350 million person country together and you just tax them, let's say each $1, every time you tax them $1, you get 250 million bucks. Boom, every single time. Whereas if you're talking about a country like Zimbabwe, where at the time when I lived there was like 9 to 10 million people, you know what I mean? Those are the cycles. So for us to get $300 million, for example, we have to go through 30 cycles. You know what I mean? In the States, they go through one cycle. You know what I mean? 200 million, you know what I mean? Like that's the economies of scale, you know? So when you look at that, like it's impossible, for example, to have something that you, living in Canada, you would think is normal, to say universal healthcare. Like the resources just don't exist. You know what I mean? If you say police presence, for example, so people were talking about police, defund the police. Coming from a third world country, I'm like, holy shit, man. People don't understand how lucky they are to have a huge police presence in this country. Like I've been in a place where the police presence isn't huge and it's corrupt, you know, to a certain degree, but it's corruption everywhere, but it's a different kind of corruption in third world countries versus here. You know, and it's very different. So I'm like, some things that people take for granted here are very, very pivotal and important, you know, because now just to kind of put it in perspective, in a country that's like a third world country, that's lawlessness based on the police presence, the whole preventative measure is the police, where when they're not there, different types of crime that you guys just don't know here just happen. You know what I mean? People getting mugged, getting ambushed, getting robbed, crazy shit where you're just like, holy fuck. This doesn't exist here, you know what I mean? Because of such a huge police presence, you know? But you can't look at it as a meaningful, important preventative measure because you've always had it. You know what I mean? So by virtue of always having it, you always like, you can find the loopholes to go, oh man, these guys are fucking mentioned, they're fucking nada, blah, because you've always had it. So it's like, you know, it's not really important. It's normal, you know? And so it's like universal healthcare, for example, is another one she was talking about. And I was like, that's not normal. You know, for most countries in the world, just to say you get sick and you go to the hospital and they take care of you, like without asking questions and asking you to pay something. Like where I'm from, they would give you like base level fucking treatment, and then the rest you gotta pay for. You know what I mean? Period. You know, and I always tell this story where I'm like, okay, so when I was growing up, okay, talking about healthcare system, just an actual functional healthcare system. When I was growing up, I was maybe 11, 11, 12, and we were driving to a different city in my dad's pickup truck. Me, my dad, and my brother. You know, we're going to a butchery because like there's a butcher shop where you can get, you know, fresh meat, yada yada. Anyway, so we go into this place and then we see a car accident. Yeah. Now in this country where I'm from, the medical system is different than you where if there's a car accident, fucking ambulance to show up and blah, because there's so many of them. Here, like there, somebody has to get to where they're going, say, hey, there's an accident back there. Then they'll come back there and take care of you, you know, or which is what we did at this time, you stop and you give them as much help as you can. So what happened, I'm 11 or 12 at the time. So imagine this, I'm 11 or 12 at the time. We pull over for these people because they've been in an accident. A bunch of them are hurt, like badly hurt. Like this is the first time I saw like crazy injuries, blood everywhere. This guy whose fucking skull was cracked and you could see inside his head. You know what I mean? And we put him in the back of our pickup truck to go to the next hospital. And then whoever is like kind of okay, we leave there and say, okay, we're gonna fucking get to the hospital, drop these guys off and tell them that you guys, they need to come back. So we drive about 20, maybe 30 kilometers, with these people. You know what I mean? So I'm sitting in the back next to this guy and he's got a fucking, I can see in his head and there's blood everywhere. People have got these big gaping wounds. It's that kind of place. You know what I mean? That's not abnormal. That's how it is. We don't have these big fucking 4-lane highways, Now maybe things have changed now a little bit, but not to the degree that it's like here where you've got crazy big 4-lane highways and all these amenities. Like you just can't afford certain things in third world countries. You know what I mean? So it's hard to imagine, and that's what I mean when I say culture shock sometimes. It's hard to imagine things that are different because if you live in Canada, for example, some things are just guaranteed. You know what I mean? You guarantee certain things and that's it. That's the Canadian experience. In other places of the world, you don't get it. You know what I mean? You're guaranteed a different kind of experience. So it's very interesting.
Yeah, that's craziness.
Bananas.
Yeah, bananas for sure, dude. Before we started recording, there's something that you said, and it's actually just like the combination of words that I really like.
Yeah.
But we were talking and you said the words lose graciously. And
Yes.
lose usually has a negative connotation and graciously usually has a positive connotation. And you put them together. And I'm curious if you wanted to riff on that or like elaborate on how to lose graciously.
Okay, lose graciously is something that I learned as an athlete, because I've been an athlete my whole life, right? Like, so initially I wasn't super big into sports. I was athletic, I was a guy who was athletic. But my older brother, he was the super athlete. Like he could do everything. He was like, I remember like at 17, 18, he was like 200 plus pounds, run fast, super jacked, like plays like rugby, everything. You know what I mean? He was like my idol for all intents and purposes. So it's like when we went to boarding school now, our schooling system is slightly different. You've got like terms, it's like a British system. So you've got you go to school for 3 months and then you go home for a holiday for 1 month, So a term is 3 months. And so each term has got different sports, right? And because you're in boarding school, it's not like you go home and you chill and you hang out. It's like after school, everybody has to participate in some sort of after school sport curriculum, something. Otherwise, you go and you work out or you study or you do productive things. So all of a sudden now I found that it was easy to play sports because at least you'd have structure, you'd learn something and then you'd compete and you'd actually get like a holistic, experience versus just going to work out because you want to play sports. You know what I mean? So I started playing all these different sports. But playing so many sports, you got onto a team that represented the school, so the school team, or you got on the house team that represented the dormitory or the house you lived in, the compound you lived in. You know what I mean? So losing, for example, happened on multiple levels where if you're one of the better athletes, you would win like in the intramural, in inter-school inter-house competition, like at the school, and then winning there, then you represent the school because you're the best at this, and then you go. So you'd learn to lose at this level or be like, I'm second best, so I'm kind of on the team, but I'm running the relay. I'm not like in all these things. So losing graciously was like something we learned because we learned that losing wasn't because it wasn't like a sign of being bad at something or being shitty or anything. It was a sign that you required improvement in a specific area. You know what I mean? To say, if you lost a rugby game, we didn't get our asses whipped for being shitty. It was like, hey guys, we could have won if this guy had made his tackle in this position, if we had rucked and mauled properly here, if we had cycled, you'd get actual critical input from your coaches and mentors about what happened, and then you could work on that, and then next game you'd work on something different and you gradually improve. So from that, I realized that losing, you know what I mean, is actually a gracious activity that most people don't embrace, because it's the best way to find out where you're lacking, where you fall short. You know what I mean? And you see it today with a lot of like guys, men especially, where they always say life is hard. And it's like, well, life is hard for everyone. You know what I mean? There's nobody who life is easy for. You might say life is easy for women, but it's like they kind of have to depend on you, and you're complaining right now. So imagine that. The person you kind of have to depend on is sometimes the men are complaining about life being hard. What the fuck is it for me? Or children. Again, Children have to depend on you, and you're complaining. What the fuck is going to happen to them if they're like, this guy I have to depend on, and they're seeing you complain, oh, life is hard, woe is me. It's like losing graciously. So when things get hard or you lose, it's actually a sign that you're either not smart enough or you're not strong enough. You need to work on something. You know what I mean? Why are you losing? People never ask that. Why are you losing? Because typically in life, you only lose at the things that you choose to compete in. You know what I mean? Like, it's not like it's like no one will show up and say, oh, you lost this basketball game. No, you didn't play it. It's like, no, I didn't lose. I wasn't playing. It's like, as soon as you choose to partake in something, the possibility of losing becomes a possibility, right? It becomes a reality. Now you can lose or you can win, you know? And for some reason, like, people have forgotten that, right? Like to win, you have to put losing on the board in order to actually win. Because if you're competing and winning doesn't exist on the board, losing, I mean, if you're competing in something you can't lose, then you really can't win. Because, you know, like a win can only be derived by like handing out a loss. You have to beat something, someone, you have to overcome something to win.
Yeah, and that very person could be yourself too. It could be
exactly
the inner rival or the inner role model. I got that on the last podcast from my buddy Ted. Nice. So it's like if you're looking at, so the trajectory is a mountain, and your role model's at the top, but your rival's right next to you. And the rival is the person that you look at in the mirror, or it's the person that you do not want to be. So you have like a higher, better version of yourself, and then you have your lesser version of yourself. And as we are in the present is the person that travels between the two.
I love that, dude. That's dope.
Yeah, that's pretty neat. Yeah. That was like 10. Your travel, it wasn't me. It was someone else.
Like destination. That's like a better you.
Absolutely. So what are some values that are non-negotiables for you?
You have to set standards for yourself. And I don't like to give specific standards because standards are a personal thing. And I'm actually planning on doing a little like vlog about a lot of these things. It's coming out. You got to check it out. But it's like standards is what you need, you know, because standards is the distance between where you're at now and what you want. You know, to say, for example, and you know this because you're a trainer and a coach, if someone wants to get a jacked physique, you know what I mean? All of a sudden, it's like, wow, why do you want that? You know, and the reason is inconsequential. Everyone has their own reasons, but they need to be clear on the reason, because when it gets tough, they need to be able to fall back on that and say, well, fuck, this is why we're doing this, man. And once you have the why and you understand the why, then we get to the how. How are we going to do this? Well, we got to clamp down on the diet. We got to do this. We got to do that. We got to do this. We got to do that. Those are the standards. You know what I mean? And it's like that with everything. You know what I mean? Because your standards will literally tell you what you're going to get. You know, if you don't have a standard, then you can't achieve an objective, because the standard is like the steps, the pegs you have to kind of climb through to get there. You know, to say, hey, I need to lose this much weight, as well as put on this much muscle, as well as be active on this many. That's a very basic standard, obviously. But it's like, I think what's non-negotiable is having actual standards. You know what I mean? For everything, whether it's the women you want to deal with, the men you want to deal with, the actual career path you want to take in, a value system based on what you're worth. What is your time worth? You know what I mean? Those are all values and standards. You know, to say like, I'm not going to get off my couch when I'm not getting this. Why would I? I could do better for myself. You know, like here's a good example. As I was exploring myself over the past 6 months, I took on a job, a very lucrative job. It was a great job, but part of the job had like additional work lumped into it that I was able to do, but I wasn't going to be compensated. Right now, everyone else was doing it, which is, hey, kudos to them. Like, if you want to do things for free, that's cool. But I was like, well, wait a minute. This kind of work isn't actually outlined as part of my specific function. So if I'm going to do it, I have no problem doing it. But you're gonna have to compensate me for doing this kind of work. Otherwise, hire the appropriate person to do this work. You know. So my standard actually led to me quitting that job and saying, hey, listen, we can't get along on this. So I left that. You know what I mean? Because I had a standard. But by sticking to my standard, for example, I was able to put myself in a position where I can get a significantly better opportunity that's actually in alignment with me. Temporary loss, yes. Greater gain, right? Sacrifice, another concept that people have forgotten.
Totally. Got a pretty neat question on this one. So what's a life without standards?
Chaos, dude. Right?
That's
it's
legit.
Chaos.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's chaos, because standard, for example, is something as simple as saying when my hair is out of like whack, and not like there's something that's globally out of whack, but when I don't like the way my hair looks, I'll get it fixed, whether it's a haircut or combing it or styling it or whatever. If I don't like the way my hair fixed, no matter what's happening, I'll fix it. Simple.
Totally.
That's a simple standard. Or if I can't get up in the morning and do 50 push-ups unencumbered and not hurt, and I need to do something about it. That's a simple standard. You know what I mean? And you don't have those standards, life becomes chaotic, and it becomes chaotic in the most unimaginable ways, because things happen that you're not ready for, you know, and you only know you're not ready for things when they show up. You know what I mean? And that's by not having standards, right? Because when you have standards, for example, you start to navigate your life. You'll say, I got to go to bed by, you know, at a time that allows me to get 8 hours of sleep. Okay. What time do I have to be up tomorrow to start my day? Yeah, I got to be up at 6. Okay. What's 8 hours from 6? 10 p.m. At the very latest, I got to be in bed by 10 p.m. Well, as we all know, going to bed isn't as simple as 10 p.m. I hop in bed and I fall asleep. So that means I got to start winding down at about 9. You know, that's just by having one standard. I got to get 8 hours of sleep. You know what I mean? It'll force you to figure out the rest. Okay, 8 hours of sleep. I get up at 6. I got to be somewhat asleep by 10. Fuck, I don't fall right asleep. So I got to start winding down at 9 so I can be in bed by 9:30. You know what I mean? So now the magic number is 9. I got to start winding down at 9 and be in bed by 9:30. Write it down. I'm in bed by 9:30. I start to wind out at 9. Very simple standard. You get your 8 hours and you get up and you go, right?
I like that. So for the idea that if you don't get it right the first time, do you just toss it to the wind, or how do you reiterate a concept? So the outcome is the most important part. How do you reiterate until you get to the outcome?
The outcome isn't the most important part. The journey is the most important part. People forget that, because the outcome is the reward for completing the journey. Right?
That's right.
That's what people have forgotten. People just want the outcome. So now, for example, you have people looking for shortcuts, life hacks, all these things without undertaking the journey. So a journey is a given amount of distance from point A to point B, non-negotiable. You know what I mean? And we'll use, let's say, an analogy I use with my clients. I say, the quickest destination between 2 points is a straight line. But as we all know in life, there are no straight lines. You can never just straight line shoot to anything. So between point A and point B is actually 1,000 kilometers as a straight line. That's how planning works. In planning, you look and you don't anticipate any objectives and you see 1,000 kilometers. But because life is unfair and there's a bunch of objectives, it's actually going to be at least 1,000 kilometers. If everything goes right and you move in a straight line, it's at least 1,000. Right? As things go wrong, you're gonna veer off. You know, if it's 1,000 this way, if you go this way, you've added. If you go that way, you come back, you've added. Like every time you go off course and have to course correct, you add distance to split. You know what I mean? To the actual journey, destination, because you're not going in a straight line, right? So it's like you have to keep moving towards the destination. That's what you have to do. That's where the growth is, you know, because after you get to that destination, you figure it out to say, okay, Jesus Christ. That journey is not 1,000 kilometers. It's actually 2,050. You know what I mean? So next time I'm planning a journey that's similar and it's 1,000, I'm going to budget for 2,050 kilometers. You know, but people don't do that. They go, oh, it's 1,000 kilometers. Fucking go, dude. It's like, no, dude. It clearly last time you saw it was 2,050. So budget for at least that. And then based on understanding what happened last time, I veered off a bunch of different times. The budget for 2,050 kilometers, tack on a bit more, budget for 3,000 kilometers. So that when it's 2,600 kilometers, it's going to be hard as fuck because your expectations are violated. But you're ready for 3 and you got 2,006. So you're good because it wasn't as hard as you actually planned it to be. You know what I mean?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I heard a post today, and it was from a fellow named Alex Ramosi, and it was really cool. I wrote it down. So he said, so if you can think in decades instead of days, you'll be so much further when the decade comes than those that only thought in days that entire 10 years. So
I like
think
it.
longer, not shorter. And then I actually think I say the thing with my clients as well. Expect it to take longer than you think.
100%, dude.
And when you go in with that expectation, and it actually does take longer, because everything always takes longer than we anticipated. And it's just the unrealistic expectation that we're just.
Especially if it's new.
Exactly. And so then when we actually make put like a longer time horizon on anything, then we have a higher probability of staying to it because we anticipate it to be longer. I totally agree with that. People just want things quicker, faster, short term.
Everybody wants it quick.
Yeah. They'd rather go from island to island to figure out like the one
not,
thing.
not even island to island. Like nowadays, people want to do 500 kilometers worth of effort and still get 1,000. It's like, dude, that's not going to work. It's not going to work at all. That's what a shortcut really is. A shortcut is doing less than is required and expected to get the same output. Like that's inaccurate. And the reason it's like that is because life has become buttressed, by other people. As you become older as an adult, you start to realize that to go as the people who are covering your ass kind of start to move out of the way, life starts to get real, because now it's like where you would do 500 kilometers of work and someone does the other 500 for you and get 1,000. The other person might now have a kid and have this and have that and have all these other things that are happening in their life, and they can't do the 500 for you. They got to give it somewhere else, and now you got to figure that part out for yourself. And that's where a lot of people get into those situations where it's like a life-changing calamity of some sort, because someone always came and saved them and swooped in as Superman. You know what I mean? It's like the Superman effect. People always think there's going to be a Superman effect to their problems, and a lot of the time there isn't.
Yeah, you got to be mindful with that, because if someone is helping someone often enough, that's enabling. And then you're training the other people to depend on you. So they never try to learn anything themselves. They never problem solve themselves. They never introduce critical thinking and self-reflection.
100%.
And that actually ties into what we were talking about before as well, about cooperation. And something that was fun, that is it's hilarious that we were chatting about it, but it's funny that what we find a majority of people I'll speak from a first person point of view. For the longest time, until there was a point where I actually wanted to progress, I thought, I'm a genius. I'm going to keep my ideas to myself and then just hold on to them and not cooperate. And in doing that, I also had the insecurity of progressing towards something, because I didn't want to reveal my secrets, which in turn made me stagnant. There was no winning or losing, because I never took action, because I was paranoid that someone else was going to borrow my ideas and my concepts and then find their own success as well. And I find that as we were chatting about it, that collaboration is, I think it's slowly becoming a little bit, or maybe it just depends on the niches or the individuals, or maybe I have no idea. But from like a standpoint, I think that there's a little bit less cooperation and there's more resistance to actually asking for help.
Oh, 100%, dude. Like, I wouldn't necessarily say resistance to asking for help. I would say people aren't, because I don't think people have a problem asking for help. What they're doing is they're not reciprocating in that equation to say, like, I can't consistently ask you for help without any kind of reciprocity. You know what I mean? And a lot of time when people ask for help, they're not actually asking for help. They're asking for someone to execute on their behalf. Because asking for help, for example, they're complaining, and because that's what complaining is. Complaining is asking someone to execute on behalf. So they're complaining, to kind of sum it up in one word. And asking for help is like actually solving the problem yourself, realizing that you're inadequately equipped to deal with it, and then finding someone who can add in their input to make you complete, whole. You know what I mean? So it's like me saying, for example, Kyle, I need to lift this thing and put it up here. I cannot do it by myself. It's 200 pounds. I can lift 200 pounds, obviously, but it's like 200 pounds. The max I can go is like a 150. So I need somebody who can at least lift, 50 pounds of weight to help me, at least, and then we do it together. But I need to have problem solved the problem to a certain degree, so I understand the issue, number one, and then I can formulate a potential solution, and then I ask for help. So I think people have forgotten to reciprocate asking for help by potentially solving part of the problem themselves, so that they're asking for specific things, so that so that you can now solve the actual problem. I think that's what's missing, because right now, for example, and you said it perfectly with the collaboration thing. A lot of people want to collaborate because they forget that by sharing what you know, other people will do better. They will, but they won't do better than you, because you being the avatar of this idea can see it from a very unique perspective where when it helps them, it helps you understand the problem better. So that means the next person you run into, you can say, hey, this is how it's done. But there's this guy named Kyle who like had this problem, and so he did it this way. You know what I mean? So here's 2 different ways to do it. You know, so by helping you, I find an additional way to do what I do. You know, so in my martial arts career, for example, and that's how I figured it out. I've taught over 1,000 people this shit, the same shit. And everyone I teach is the same template, exactly the same. Here's your stance, here's your basics, here's how you walk, here's how you punch, here's how you kick, here's how put together in combination, here's your defense, it's all the same stuff. But every single person I've taught spits it out differently. Every single person. So by teaching them, I get to see a new perspective on how the martial arts can be applied. You know what I mean? Before I started teaching people, I firmly believe martial arts was just for kicking ass and beating the shit out of people. Until I started teaching people who like didn't even want to beat the shit out of anyone, but they got something out of it, a spiritual component. You know what I mean? A confidence component. You know, the range of motion increased, their cardio increased. You know what I mean? They got stronger, all these other things. So I was like, oh shit, it's actually like a lifestyle. It's like an improvement of yourself based on what you're missing, you know? And that's how I got it. So I was like, you got to teach these things, you know, because as you share it, it becomes better. You know, somebody else learns it, and they go and they say, where'd you learn this? When they teach it, someone else, oh, fuck. Just like you said in this podcast, oh, the last one I was talking to said this. That's how they frame it. They're not going to lie and say, oh, dude, I came up with it. They'll say, oh, fuck, I was having this podcast with Mukai, and he says, oh, fuck, that's crazy. You know what I mean? Now they had it, you know, and then it just goes down the chain.
Totally. It's just filling in the blanks as we go. And then, it just creates this bigger, like larger mosaic that more people can pull from. Right.
And that's what it is. Because once we all start to fill in this picture, the picture becomes more colorful and vibrant, because it might be my concept, but now it is a version of it that exists that's mine and yours, because you took the information, repackaged it in a way that contextually works for you, and you spit it out. Then whoever else catches it goes, oh shit, and then they repackage in a way that works for them, and they spit it out. You know, so that if it's by the time it's 10 people removed, it's going to have these 10 different influences that have different types of, you know, genius to them. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. And then boom, it's a significantly better concept. You know what I mean?
So absolutely. And I totally understand I love it. I think it's mostly because there's a part of me that's like pretty lazy, and I know that there's smarter people than me. So I just love asking people like their thoughts or their assistance or just like a reflection and going into it with an open mind. And I think that the thing that's really interesting now I'm pondering it is when we have an emotional, like such an emotional attachment to something that it prevents our progress. So we are scared, possibly fearful or insecure about sharing our idea, because an idea for any creative in any endeavor, in any kind of realm, could be a painter, could be a musician, could be a martial artist, could be a writer, could be a speaker, could be someone that's like tech-based. It could be anything. But whatever that creativity is an expression of the person at that moment in time. And so it's very scary. And it's very scary to share an idea in case that there is a rejection of that idea, and thus a rejection of us as a person. Yeah, how would you cater around that? How would you reframe that? How would you shift that perspective from a place of scarcity to a place of abundance?
Some things don't need to be reframed. You need rejection. Rejection is important. And the reason rejection is important, because done properly, rejection puts out what's not necessary, what's not sufficient. You know what I mean? That's what rejection is for ultimately. This is insufficient. It's not good enough. You know, it's like, let's say, one complaint I hear with a lot of guys these days is that women have unrealistic standards or superficial, whatever you want to call it. But it's like, well, that's their standard. You know what I mean? And back to standards now. It's so that you can reject what doesn't work for you. You know what I mean? So now, for example, it's like if you show up and you give me 40% of what you're capable of, and then because we are in such an accepting society, so that's cool, Kai, you can just do 40. Who the hell is going to do the other 60? Somebody has to do it. You know? So you have to reject the 40 and say, dude, that's not good enough. You know? So the rejection is important. And one thing that people forget is that all our emotional experiences are important. The sad ones, the happy ones, the angry, they're all important because they give you information or feedback that's going to help you act appropriately. So you shouldn't avoid them and say, I only deal with things that make me happy. No, deal with things and figure out the things that make you happy. Deal with things. Don't deal with just what makes you happy. Like, deal with things. That's the first point. Deal with them. Once you deal with it, you say, oh, I actually don't like this. Then you put like, oh, we don't like this. Now you have awareness. Awareness is important. Deal with this. Oh, I like this. Then you write that down. Oh, I like this. Just in those two instances, you know what you don't like here and what you like here. Just by dealing with things. You know what I mean? So your idea, lose your attachment to it and understand that it could be good, it could be bad, but it requires complexity from input from other people. Because that's really what complexity is when it comes to ideas, is input from other people. Now, input comes through experience. So if I say, Kyle, if you do 50 push-ups every day, you're going to get this dope fucking physique. That's input, because you're going to go, really? And then you do 50 push-ups a day. And then lo and behold, a month later, you're like, yo, fucking Mukai, it worked. Some guy will come up to you and say, Kyle, how'd you get that physique? So fucking ran to this fucking guy named Mukai and he said, do 50 push-ups a day for the next month. And I did it. And, now you passed it on. Then this guy will go, I want to look better than Kyle. What if I did 75? You go to 56 and you go, shit, this is fucking hard. And you learn that, okay, you can't just jump from 50 to 75. This first lesson right there. Then you learn, periodization. I got to go 55, 60, 65, 70. And that'll take him X amount. You know what I mean? But that's an idea. It requires that. But turn that idea on his head. Well, how'd you get like that? Oh, dude, I just did 5 push-ups a day. You got to say, get the fuck out of here, bro. That's not enough. You need to, because that's where people get these ideas. Because I was doing meetups and I was chatting with a guy, and he was saying, this is what he said, and it was very interesting. He said this. He said, I go to play intramural sports with people to meet, like he wanted to get fit and meet all these other things, but he wasn't really getting what he wanted out of it, but he was putting up with what he did get. You know what I mean? So he had an idea of what he wanted from a situation, didn't get it from that situation, but put up with what he got. Yep. Now, 2 things start to happen when you do that. Number one, over time, you're going to develop a negative relationship with that thing because you're consistently not getting what you want out of it. You know what I mean? You know what I mean? That's what rejection is for. Because if you do that, then number one, you're going to save yourself that fucking headache of always not getting what you want. You know what I mean? Yes, you get nothing, but sometimes, and a lot of the times actually, nothing is better than something, because getting something you don't want is worse than getting nothing, you know what I mean, that you want. People forget that, to say like, so you'd rather have something that you don't want than have nothing. Right? You're better off having nothing, because when you have nothing, you can get what you want. But if you're occupied with this 30%, this 40%, that's 40%, dude. Like that's substantial. Because if you occupy yourself, now this is why rejection is important. If you occupy yourself with 40%, you can never get 100% from anywhere. You can only ever get whatever's missing. And that's the problem. Because now if you take subpar information or anything that you don't reject, you take up capacity, you take up bandwidth, you take up space that could be given to what you actually want, what is worth that space, right?
Yeah, because then you're just like filling your brain up with garbage.
Yeah, exactly.
And then you're not able to recycle it, process it, or actually worse, you find yourself so ingrained in whatever that particular spot is that it's almost like it would be like if you were dating the very first person you were in a relationship with, and then you broke up, and then you just thought to yourself, I guess relationships are not for me. And then you never go for another relationship. But there's also like other options. There's another relationship. There's another mentorship. There's another coaching program.
Everything, dude.
I think where it's like, I think it gets really silly when, if I were to think to myself, okay, I'm going to do this one program, and this one program is going to be the end all be all, or even if it doesn't deliver on what I expected, and then I leave and I choose not to continue to try finding whatever method works in order to get to where I want to go. I think people get really lost in the how rather than focusing on the why. So it's kind of like what you said about standards and clarity as well. It's like a lack of clarity, a lack of standards. You're not going to be able to press yourself past that point of pain or short-term pain for long-term gain, obviously.
Yeah, 100%, dude. 100%. That's exactly it, you know, and that's how, for example, people's drive dies to do things because they put up with the wrong thing for so long, right? That they lose hope of finding the right thing, right? This is people who are stuck in relationships, stuck in jobs they consistently complain about, stuck doing things they know no longer serve them, but they just do them because they're familiar. That's failing to reject what is insufficient, you know. And the problem is we have such a negative relationship with rejection. You know, rejection is a good thing because if you're the one being rejected, okay, again, you learn something. Maybe this isn't for me. More importantly, you free yourself up for something that is for you, that will accept you, right? Number two, if you're the one doing the rejecting, you're opting out for something that you know you don't want, right?
That's true. It's a two-way street. That's right.
It's a two-way street. Yep. You know, so rejection is actually very important because you know, let's say now you, and this is why it's important, because you, if you want this woman or you want this job or you want this achievement, you know, and you keep chasing after it, it needs to reject you if you're ill-equipped for it. Whether it's the woman, whether it's the job, whether it's the achievement, it needs to reject you if you're ill-equipped. You know what I mean? Now, the problem is people have the option to accept even if it's ill-equipped. Everything else doesn't. You know what I mean? So if you want to climb Mount Kilimanjaro and you haven't done any of the training, you'll fucking die half. It has rejected you. You know what I mean? If you do all the work, you climb to the top. It has accepted you. You know what I mean? And then you know what it takes to get to the top, right? So it's like rejection is very necessary. It's very, very necessary, you know, and people need to start embracing that.
I didn't realize this, but now that we're like shooting the shit about it, rejection is synonymous with another word that people are talking about often, and that's boundaries. Because if you're sticking to your boundaries, that means you have to reject things that don't work within those boundaries.
100%.
That could be job, it could be people, it could be anyone, it could be anything, right?
Sky's the limit.
Yeah. So when you have boundaries that are set up, you must be prepared to reject others or things in order to bring your best self, to go from 40% to 99%.
100%, dude. And that's why boundaries exist, because they literally keep things out. That's rejection, you know? And people have forgotten that because we're always taught to be accepting of everything. It's like, no, you shouldn't accept everything, dude. Like even shame, for example. Shame isn't a good thing, but it is a necessary feeling, and it's necessary for shame to be out there. Because shame is something you feel when what you're doing is out of alignment with the general status quo. You know, if someone says that shameful behavior, it's time for you to stop and think about what you're doing. Now, that doesn't mean it's shameful. It means you have to think about why is it shameful, you know, and then you can come up with a set of reasons. And then you can also then say, why would it not be shameful? And you come up with a set of reasons. And if the reasons about why it's not shameful make more sense, then you say, no, dude, it's not shameful because da, 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 and you get to set them straight, you know, or you actually look at and the reasons are speak the truth, and you say, this is actually a shameful behavior. At which point in time, you have the option to correct and stop behaving shamefully.
Crazy. Yeah. I think I love that you added on that shame part. That like so good.
Yeah, it's part of rejection. Like it's very like we feel ashamed when we're rejected. You know, you're not enough. Oh fuck, I'm not enough. You know, but you need to feel shame here and there at some point in time. You know what I mean? Like and necessary shame, not unnecessary, because sometimes people take it too far and then they drive it home too much. But really, if something is not in alignment with you and it's not for you and it doesn't work, you need to reject it. You know what I mean? You need to say, no, dude, this actually doesn't work. I cannot do this. You know, so that they know, so that, you know what I mean? And you know. More importantly, what will happen is it teaches you to actually stand up for yourself and say, I'm not cool with this. Yeah. And you start to actually reject things that don't work for you. And it teaches them to think about what they're doing, to say, okay, if this person isn't cool with it and that person isn't cool with it, why is it most of the people I interact with at this level aren't cool with this thing? You know, maybe this is not a good thing.
Yeah. It's actually, shame is neither good nor bad. It just is what it is. And then the perception and the story of it is where we need to filter through. Ooh. So it could be a variation of it, I suppose, would be shame around, it could be shame of any sort, but the narrative that has been placed upon the person, they can pull that into the future. So when they feel shame where they're actually in alignment, but the only reason that that I've experienced shame for this one, at least, is the reason I've experienced shame in some situations is only due to the narrative of parents, friends, work, society kind of things where I knew I was in alignment, but it was just, oh, I feel like I'm just going against the grain. So when it comes to that time where that you've experienced that shame, and then there's that fear of setting those boundaries and rejecting the things that you don't want in turn for the things that you do want, do you think it's just a matter of ripping the Band-Aid off and then just saying, this is it, these are my boundaries, this is why I'm sticking to it? What you believe to be shame is not shame at all, and I'm actually just going for 100%.
Exactly. Yeah, that's exactly what it is. You hit the nail on the head, dude. And that's why rejection and shame, all these things are important, because they allow you to reframe things in a way that's contextual to you. You know what I mean? Because now, for example, by experiencing rejection, it tells you that, hey, listen, number one, people are allowed to say what they don't want to say, and let you know it's nothing to do with you. It's about them. This is what they want or don't want. You know, and it tells you, you know, and if you're open to it, of course, that you can do that too.
Mm-hmm.
You know,
Yeah.
so if you go to a job and they say, hey, man, we actually need you to have this, this, and this, and this. And that means if someone comes to you and says, hey, Kyle, I want to work with you, man, you get to set the terms and say, oh, cool, I'd love to, but you got to do this, this, and this, and this. And if you can't do it, then you got to reject them and say, oh, no, dude, we can't work together right now. You got to do these.
Because you're doing a disservice to both parties in that case.
Exactly.
To myself, to the other person. Yeah. Because then it's taking away the opportunity for them to find the strategy that will work for them, because they're spending time in a spot that they don't want to be in, possibly. Or
and it's
if I don't want to work with them either.
Yeah. Yeah, because you're not going to give them 100%. And you may say, well, my 70% is helping them more, but like someone could give them a fucking 100. You know, what would that do for them?
Absolutely.
You know? Yeah. So, and I like that you mixed in rejection into that, because that's the other thing is people don't learn to reject societal, you know,
narratives.
Narratives that don't serve them, especially if they really have no impact on what you're doing. Like, why do you give a fuck? You know?
I totally agree with that. There was a buddy of mine, Braden. He was also on the podcast. He was a cool guy. And he had a post recently, and he's pretty popular on the TikTok and stuff right now. And he does a lot of the questions and awesome knowledge bombs that he drops. But he made a post about one where he was talking about, or he was asked about, what are your thoughts on this? What are your thoughts on this? What are your thoughts on this? Just for people asking. And it was outside of his realm of expertise. And his answer for all of it is, I don't care. And he said that the most important thing for his mental health is that he filtered the shit that he does care about and the shit that he doesn't care about. And he rejected anything that had any negative input onto his mind. So that wasn't taking up that mental bandwidth you were talking about earlier.
That. Yeah. And you should do that, because it's like people who use these crazy comparisons to say, oh, you should be happy about your life because there's this third world country where people are suffering. It's like, that has nothing to do with me. I'm suffering right fucking now. And I'm here. You know? How is it going to make me happy to think about someone else's suffering in a context that I don't understand at all? That's foreign to me. You know?
Yeah, totally.
Yeah, man, forget that shit. You know what I mean? It'll affect you if you go there, you know? That's when it'll affect you. But other than that, like, forget it, man. Like, I think that a lot of people will sometimes do that. You know, they take on things that they don't really need, that eat up too much bandwidth, and then they cause all this stress and worry, you know, that they can do nothing about. So now, for example, they're unempowered to do anything about the situation, but they've created a narrative in their head where it's a problem of fucking global, you know, proportions or whatever. And what are you going to do about it? Do you have any influence in this? Like, do you know anything about it? No. Like, if you went to learn about it, is it going to improve your life? No. So what the fuck, you know?
Yeah. I think it's something that I find that's interesting is, well, one, like, my list of things that I care about is very small, very minimal. And that's so that I could give more of myself, a higher percent of myself towards those fewer things. Because there's that
Yeah.
saying where if you're going to chase two rabbits, you're going to catch neither. You have to follow one or the other. You have to catch one or the other, or you risk losing both. And I think the one narrative, and I'll ask you what is something that society cares about that you do not? And my answer for this one is, it is, oh, that's pretty funny.
Yeah.
So it is trying to know everything all the time, all at once, and being somehow a hero in the resolution of it.
I like that one.
Yeah, there's too many people that are like, oh, we got to go save this. We got to go save that. We got to go do this. It's like, shit, you can't even make your bed. It's like, it's hard to follow. And it's like having a pseudo morality. It's like, I want to have the morale. I want to look like I'm morally up there when I actually am contrarian to what I preach. My actions, my practice and my preaching are two different things. That to me is a standard that I do not go past.
Yeah.
There has to be alignment in both. Yeah. Hypocrisy is like a mess, man. Yeah. So what is a societal narrative or something that society cares about that you don't generally?
You don't always have to be the hero. It's okay to be the villain in some stories.
Nice. And a villain in what way? Elaborate on that.
Well, ultimately, a villain is just someone who does something that's not in alignment with a bunch of other people. Ultimately, it's like if you look at break it down to a simple narrative like comic books. I mean, most villains are doing things to try and improve the world in the way they see fit. Let's talk about like most popular series, the whole Thanos thing. His whole thing was to get rid of half the people in the universe impartially. There's no favoritism. You just get rid of half in order to make things better for others. If you look at it from his perspective, it made sense. And the people who are trying to stop him from doing this good thing because it was good to him are the fucking villains. So as far as he was concerned, the Avengers are the villains. It just so happens that we are on the side of the Avengers, so we think they're the heroes. But he had a whole bunch of people who were on his side who were like, these motherfuckers. You know what I mean? They were the villains. So, and the reason I say don't be afraid to be the villain is because you are not always going to be in alignment with people for the most part, and as long as you're not actually doing villainous, heinous shit, robbing people, cheating people, like don't do those things. But if you're doing something that you genuinely love, that gives you joy and peace and other people benefit from it, and someone shows up and tells you like to fucking stop that shit because they don't think it's right, tell them to go fuck themselves. You know what I mean? Because you're doing it, it makes you happy, it works for you, and there's a whole society, a whole community of people who it works for. So I say, as long as you're not doing actual harm to people, you know what I mean, and violating other people's freedoms, do whatever the fuck you want. Just don't violate other people's freedoms and do harm to them. You know what I mean? That's it.
From a place of good intentions, not ill intentions.
Not just good intentions, good outcomes. Don't harm people. I could do something with the best intent and it could harm someone. I need to then say, oh, fuck, that's not good because I harmed this person. And course correct and do it differently. But if I'm genuine, so it's like this. It's like, there was this gentleman, I forget his name, man. He was doing the snake diet. That was so controversial. You know what I mean? But it was working for a whole bunch of people. He may have delivered his information a little bit wrong, and he was a bit abrasive, but I think it was more of a marketing tactic than it be actually abrasive. But ultimately, he helped a lot of people lose weight and clean up the eating habits and a whole bunch of other shit. You could even talk about, let's say, a guy like Andrew Tate. Some of his shit is delivered the wrong way, but ultimately, that motherfucker's helped a lot of people. You know what I mean? Some of the shit he says makes sense. Some of it doesn't make sense. What the fuck? But ultimately, you have to be who you are. You know what I mean? Now, I don't agree with either one, the snake diet guy or Andy Tate completely, but there are some things where I'll say, that shit makes sense. That'll help somebody. Good on him for putting that out there. And for example, now, when these people say these things that don't agree with you, I think people need to understand that life is so versatile that people are entitled to want what they want. You know what I mean? If I take on this archaic position and say women should be like fucking in the kitchen and cooking for men and this and that, I'm not saying every woman I see in the world should be doing that. What the person is saying is the woman who I end up with should be that type of woman. They're allowed to say that. You know, if I say the woman I marry, I wanted to do these things, I'm allowed to say that, especially if there are women around there who will come up and do it. Oh, you want me to just cook for you, Mukai? No problem. Perfect. I'm going to marry this woman. You know what I mean?
And that, I think that goes into the same idea of where you don't want to, like for coaching and clients, you don't want to work with a client or spend time with a client that's not going to like put in the work. It's a reciprocation.
Yeah,
it's a two-way street, right? And meeting those standards of what we set. And that's the thing as well, is people will say that they have these standards, but then you'll see someone working with someone, spending more time with someone, dating someone that is completely not even up to their own standards that they have verbally communicated.
Yeah, a lot of people do that.
Yeah, that's brutal, man.
It's not there for that kind of shit. Get it out of here.
That's awesome. So what are some of the difficult situations that you found yourself in the last chunk of time? How have you evolved in the last chunk of time?
Over the last growing up, man, like growing up and exploring different parts of myself. You know, I for the most part, for the longest time, I was always a very certain way. And people were always talking to me about, you know, not being that way, being more vulnerable and whatever that means, and more accepting of things and more tolerant and more this and a lot of different things. And, you know, I'd never tried that. And so I took some time to actually be that way, you know what I mean? And try some new different things and explore some new different paths and express myself in a different way. And it was interesting. It was very interesting. It was for longer than 6 months. I think the last 6 months was the culmination of that kind of experiment, you know. And because I like so one thing about me is like I like to try new and different things in order to get better outcomes. I'm always trying to optimize. I'm all about optimization. Like, you know what I mean? Like if something's optimal and it can get better improvement and you know come to a better outcome, I'm all about that. You know what I mean? So I was like, you know what? A lot of people have been saying this. I should actually do things a different way and see if it actually works. Because if it does, then there's merit to it. And, you know, I will do it that way. Mm-hmm. You know? So, and that's where I realized, don't be afraid to be the villain. A lot of the times people are saying what they would like you to do in order for them to feel better about your presence. You know, to say, oh, you know what? If Mukai was like this, you'd be the best. But it's like, would he be the best for himself? You know? Maybe he'd be the best for you, for sure, yes. If he was like this, he'd be the best for you. But would he be the best for himself? Could he do what he needs to do and how he needs to do it and what he sees himself doing or being like that? Or is it coming from a selfish place where you see a version of him that's not him, but you wish he could be that way because then he would be perfect for you, right? And people do that to us a lot, where they see something about us that would work very well for them, you know? So they say, man, why don't you try this, you know? I think it would be better if we did it this way, you know? And that's when I realized, like, you know what? A lot of the time that's coming from a place of their own insecurity, and they would like you to change in order for them to feel better, you know? Because then it's like, you know, they feel better. You've changed, you know? Now you're doing something that's within their frame of expectation, you know? This is exactly how I saw you. This is perfect, you know? But it makes you miserable as shit. You know, or not necessarily miserable as shit, but it's out of alignment with the direction you're trying to go in, with what you're trying to build, what you're trying to achieve, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Perceptions are reflections of the person that we want. Oh, no, it's how we see ourselves. Yeah, no. It'd be a projection is a reflection of ourselves.
Yes, it is. You're imposing your standard on someone else. That's ultimately what the people are doing. Yes,
I find that. Have you ever heard the story of the crabs in the bucket, where in Alaska they'll get crabs in the bucket, and you can walk by, and then this is a Bedros Keuilian story. Actually, he was in Alaska. He was walking on a wharf. There we go, a wharf. And as he was walking, there was a fisherman that had crabs in a bucket. And he noticed this one crab that was trying to make its way up out of the bucket. And so he stopped and he was like, "Hey man, you have a crab that's going to escape." And the fisherman said, "Don't worry about it. Just watch, just watch, just watch." And the other crabs went and pulled it down. So even though there was this one ambitious crab that wanted to escape, the other crabs were like, "Nah, you have to hang out in this bucket with us. You have to meet our standards."
Yeah. Yeah, people will do that, man. And sometimes it's not that they're bad people. Is that things are more manageable if they're relatable. They're more manageable, right? And that's why, for example, anytime we encounter something very different to us, it's kind of like, yo, like, it makes us stop. It gets in the way of things, right? It's like, oh, what the fuck, And that's the whole thing. And as people, we need to realize that. And that's why I was like, oh yeah, like it's got to change. Before I'd be like, these motherfuckers, but then I realized like, no, it's not people trying to be bad, and pull you down and actually belittle you and minimize you. Maybe sometimes they are, but for the most part, that's how they firmly believe things should be. And there's nothing wrong with that. But that's, and this is what I realized. And that's why I was talking about rejection as well. That's when you have to say, oh, if that's how you see me being, and it's not how I am, then we may not need to actually continue interacting in this way, whether it's doing business together, being in a relationship, being friends, being whatever. Because if we're doing business together and I do business this way, and then you say, man, if you charge less, you know how many people will show up? And I say, well, that's not the point, is it? I'm not going to minimize the cost of my service so more people can show up because I'm going to get busier, but then the volume of work I'm doing isn't, I've just multiplied the work and the cost for doing the work, I've decreased it. I'm doing more work for less now. That's not a good thing. So no, I'm not going to minimize myself that way. You know what I mean? Or, man, if you actually did this for longer periods of time, you get better results. Like, wow, this actually is very taxing for the period of time I do it. To do it for longer periods of time would be way more taxing. It will probably cause problems. So no, I can't do that for longer periods of time because then I'm going to destroy the golden goose. I'm going to kill the person doing the work. So no, we can't do that. And then what I mean? And we need to learn to start saying no to those things, to say, no, I actually can't do that. I don't want to do that. And it's nothing against you to say, fuck you, I'm not doing that because you're asking. It's like, no, I'm actually not that person. Yes, I can see what you're saying to say in this specific context for you, it would be better for me to behave this way. But holistically for me, it would not be better because that's not in alignment. It's just not me.
Yeah. And you're not going to be able to you're not going to bring 100% if your battery's just draining. And then you don't want to end up at the point where you're feeling bitter, resentful, and you're pointing the fingers and realistically in that situation, someone could have found themselves it was their choice.
Yeah,
it was the choice. And the beautiful thing about choice is I look at choice as an underrated superpower where we have the ability to make choice, which is something that people are just not taking advantage of, where we get to choose the outcome of the life. At the end of the day, at the end of the life, how is it that you want to end up living it when you look back on it? Do you want to feel bitter, resentful? Do you want to be pointing fingers at all the people that quote unquote held you back from your potential? Or is it going to take responsibility and reflection in order to be able to progress past that point?
Yeah, man, accountability, is like at the end of the day, everything that happens to us is a choice either by us or by someone else. For the most part, it's our choice. But after it happens, we still have a choice in how we move forward. How do we go from here? You still have that choice. Like I could like slap you across the face. Not your choice, not your fault. But you have a choice to go, okay, how am I gonna deal with this? Am I gonna punch this guy back, or like what's gonna happen? You have that choice, and I think people forget that that's a very important power you have to embrace, to go, you have choices, and by virtue of having choices, you can do literally whatever you want. But also understanding that, and this is why people sometimes don't use the power of choice. The power of choice, okay, is also the power of sacrifice. Because if you have to go left or right, by going left, you sacrifice going right. Yeah. So choosing is choosing where to go, but it's also choosing where not to go, because you can't be in two places at the same time, right? So it's and that's why people sometimes chase two rabbits. To come back to your analogy, they chase two rabbits because they understand if I pick the rabbit on the left, I automatically don't get the rabbit on the right. And by virtue of picking the rabbit on the left, if I don't get the rabbit on the left, then I got no rabbits. You know what I mean?
Yep.
Without understanding that, but dude, if you put all your effort on the rabbit on the left, the probability of catching a rabbit today significantly skyrockets. Especially if you've chased enough rabbits to have the information to understand how to catch them. You might not catch it today, but tomorrow, by implementing what you learned yesterday by not catching it, you might catch it, and then you consistently chase it until you know how to catch rabbits, then you start, and you know what I mean? And this is what people don't get. By the time you've mastered how to catch these rabbits, you will get so good that you will catch the rabbit on the left and then put your attention to the rabbit on the right after you've caught the rabbit on the left. And that's how you chase two rabbits, not at the same time, one after the other.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's pretty cool, because then when you actually get to the point where you develop the skills to be able to catch both rabbits, then you can teach someone how to also catch two rabbits. And that person that did not know how to catch a single rabbit now fast track that by having someone else work with them. And now they know how to catch two rabbits while others are still struggling to catch one.
Yeah, man. And that's the beauty of being people. And it comes back to what we're talking about, teaching and collaboration. Ultimately, that's what's so important about teaching, because teaching refines, because then you bypass the mistakes you made to learn the lesson. You see what I mean? So it's like every person I teach gets to jump a bunch of fucking mistakes that I made. All of them. And that's what that's how we're able to improve, because they learn it when they're like 1 year in. I've been doing it for the past 15 years. So you're getting 15 years of knowledge just dumped right on you, refined too. And then you start there. You know what I mean? So by the time you've done it for 15 years, you've got 30 years worth of contextual experience, because it's my 15 and your 15. And by the time you let it off on someone, you're dumping off 60 of, you know what I mean? And that's why it's important to share this information, because information and knowledge also compounds. That's why martial arts over 1,000 years has become this phenomenon that started like this, and now it's something completely different. And same thing could be said for anything that exists, cars, airplanes, pens, phones, you know what I mean? Like, when I moved to the States, cell phones weren't what they were today. If you wanted to take a picture with something, you had to have a camera, and then your phone had buttons on it and like the little green screen that could only do black. That was a phone. And it was profound at that time. You know what I mean? Like today, a phone is like a fucking monetary system, a video camera, a fucking photo taking device. It's everything. I can manage my money. I can trade stocks. I can communicate with people. I can create videos and share them to the internet. Like, there was a point in time where, like, you know what I mean? Like, putting a video on the internet required a team of people. Hey guys, we gotta put a video on this website. Oh, we need this. We need a plugin. We need it was like a ton of people. 2023, I could take my iPhone, sit it over here, record something in HD, put it on like Adobe Premiere Rush, cut and paste, put some transitions on it, lickety split, you've got a pretty dope video on your website, off you go. You know what I mean? That's refinement of knowledge through collaboration and sharing. We need to do it, on a greater level.
I totally agree with that, man. Normally I try to come up with a pretty solid chunk of questions, but if there's a point where I can't really think of one, that I think that is a fantastic spot, like right there, to be able to conclude. I got two final questions for you though. Yeah, I got
Hopefully
two final questions for you. Yeah, maybe. But first off, like there was a solid chunk of knowledge bombs there, dude. Like, I'm really excited to go back on this and like go through it and like just get the little clips, little knowledge bombs that you dropped. And it was cool. Like there was just like, just fire on this one, dude. So I just want to thank you very, very much for popping onto the show and hanging out and sharing your wisdom. I appreciate it very much.
Yeah, and honestly, it's not. I don't think of it as wisdom. It's just experience, man. It's like even just talking to you right now helps me process a lot of it. You know what I mean? Because sometimes it's hard to understand what parts of my story would be beneficial to anyone until I actually tell the story to someone. You know, and then they're the ones who go, "Oh shit, dude, when you said this, that was like." To me, I'd be like, dude, fuck that part. That didn't mean anything to me. You know what I mean? But to you might be like, holy shit, man, like my whole fucking mind was blown. You know what I mean? So I think that's why it's important to share, because ultimately what I find important, you may be just gloss it over and be like, dude, I was dealing with that when I was 6. Like forget that, And to me, I'm like, wow, like, oh shit, So I thank you for having me, man. It actually helps me like figure out a lot about myself, just actually sitting and talking about it.
Oh, my pleasure, man. It's been fun just being able to chat and like learn from people too. So it's been a good one. So final questions. One's dark, so I'm going to set the context.
Okay.
It's the end of your life. Going right off the deep end. It's the end of your life.
Yeah.
You're on your deathbed. The people that you love are around you. None of your content exists. This podcast does not exist. What is one piece of advice that you're going to pass on to the people that you care for?
Shit. I would tell them to go and do what they enjoy doing. Yeah. Go find the shit that makes you that you enjoy doing and explore it.
I love it.
Like what turns you on, and that's a very underutilized term, turn on, because it's got such a heavy sexual connotation. But if you go for the things that turn you on, like actually turn you on, like they get your attention, they fucking, when someone says that you get drawn in, like they turn you on, you go to some amazing places in your life. Like I learned this when I discovered martial arts. When I discovered martial arts, I was under the impression at the time that martial arts was something kids and fucking losers did to gain confidence. It's like, yeah, this is children and fucking guys who need to fucking man up a little bit, go do martial arts. And martial arts at the time, I thought it was like, if you said martial arts, in my mind, I'll see karate, like the kids, and some fucking guy goes, aya, aya, aya. That's what was in my mind. Until I actually went and did a class, and it was like, oh, you know what I mean? That shit turned me on. You know what I mean? Like it woke me up. And it took me from there to where I am today. You know what I mean? Everything that happened since martial arts has been fucking amazing. Even the low points. You know what I mean? The low points, at the time, they suck. At the time, you're like, holy fuck, they suck. But once you navigate them and you get stronger and you learn so much about yourself and you realize how resilient you are and you realize what you can actually put up with and what you can put out, it's all worth it. Like if I hadn't done martial arts, I wouldn't understand what I can do. I wouldn't understand what I'm capable of, let alone what people are capable of. People
Absolutely.
are like these amazing beings that like take things from a non-existent place in our minds and bring them to life. You know what I mean? We've got like the power of God,
We can create. Yeah.
We can create. Yeah.
Yeah. Things are created twice, once in the mind and once in the world.
Yeah, dude. And when you understand that, how powerful that is, it's a game changer, because a lot of the time when people think create, they think physical creation. It's like, no, dude. Like even this conversation is a metaphysical creation, because anyone who hears it will understand it a different way. That's just based on their own conceptual understanding of whatever's happening. Like we've just created something here. It's amazing what you can create. Like even just create a mental model of how your life you want it to be. So martial arts taught me a lot about like that, like honing into things that turn you on. They say like things turn you on because they speak to you. That's what being turned on ultimately is. That's why not every woman turns every man on. It's like some women are just like, whatever. But the ones that like, they took career, same thing. The careers that make abundance, like absurd amounts of money and absurd amounts of recognition come with them. But they just don't appeal until this one thing is like, oh, dude, like this talks to me. Like if you go for the things that turn you on and talk to you, whether it's people, career paths, hobbies, like so much gold there.
Yeah, because you're gonna have the fire in your belly. A really good lesson that I wanted to point out about actually is how you did not allow your perception of martial arts, where it was for losers and kids. You
Yeah.
did not allow your perception of martial arts to prevent you from trying it out. And by overcoming that perception and experiencing it in a real world scenario where you actually participated in it, it completely changed the trajectory of your life.
Yeah. But I can't take credit for that. And this is why you need mentorship in life. At the time, a gentleman who was kind of a pseudo mentor of mine tricked me into trying it. Okay. So I was doing Kali, Eskrima, Filipino martial art, Anis. And he says, Mukai, you look like a Muay Thai fighter. And I says to him, what the fuck is Muay Thai? And he explains it, and he explains it, and I'm like, sure, And so the way he explains, one of the best martial arts in the world, thousands of years old from Thailand, it's probably one of the best striking systems, So to me, that doesn't make sense to me because I'm like NCAA track and field athlete going to university. Like none of that makes sense to me. Like, where am I ever going to need to apply this shit and go beat up some people with knees and out like this? I was like, yeah, I hear you, dude, but what does that have to do with me? And then he tried to use the power of visualization. He goes, you remember the movie Kickboxer? He says, yeah, Kickboxer, yeah, I remember that. Like, Jean-Claude Van Damme did like Muay Thai. I thought he did karate. He goes, no, Tong Po was Muay Thai. I said, but he beat the shit out of Tong Po. What the fuck I want to do that for? Then he's like, no, dude, that was a movie. He had to win because he's the protagonist. But Muay Thai is actually, much better than all these other. And I was like, dude, you lost me. The way he tricked me into trying it, he was like, I don't think you can do a full class. Yeah, then I was like, get the fuck out of here, bro. You're out to lunch. And I didn't do a full class.
That is awesome.
I died halfway through.
you graciously lost.
I graciously lost. Yeah. There you go.
Awesome.
Wait to wrap it up. I died halfway through, man. I was like, oh fuck. But and this is where it turned me on because all the losers were still fucking killing it. Bah, 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 bah. So I was like, what the fuck, man?
That was awesome.
Yeah.
So the final question for the podcast before the outro. In this season of your life, with who you are today, presently, let's say the best version of you was sitting right next to you. What advice would that Mukai give to present day Mukai in order to get through, to push?
Don't doubt yourself. Yeah, it's funny that you say that because I'm at a nexus point where that's what I've been telling myself in order to get to the next level and start the next chapter. Do not doubt yourself because you know the path that you need to and wants to take. So you cannot doubt yourself because no one else can tell you that. Where you are right now, you got yourself there. So whether it's good or bad, you got yourself there. So you're the only one who knows the way to the next part. If the next part needs to be good, you know the way there. If the next part needs to be this, you know the way there. So do not doubt yourself. Now, that doesn't mean you know the secret to success, but it does mean you do know what the next step is. Everyone knows what the next step is. And that's one thing we take away from ourselves just by doubting ourselves. Do not doubt yourself. Take the next step because the next step will reveal the next one.
Nice. That was a great answer. That was a great answer, man.
It will.
All right, folks. That's what I've got for you in today's episode. Where can people find you, Mukai?
My website, www.mukaimaromo.com. Social media, get on Instagram. I'm always on Instagram. Not always. The last 6 months, I didn't really do much, man. Like my traction slowed the fuck down. But I'm picking it back up. Instagram at Mukai_Maromo. Best 2 ways to get me.
Beautiful. And if you loved today's episode, please do me a favor right now. Share it on your Instagram stories and tag me with my handle at WarriorBodyKyle, along with Mukai_Maromo. That is one of the ways that we grow. And until next time, I hope your day treats you as good as you look.